Hi, I'm just gonna I'm gonna dive right in. There's no hip way to say this, but I grew up Christian, Protestant Christian to be specific. And I know like it kind of has to be said that that word brings up Christian, that brings up a lot of stuff for a lot of people, and it's really painful, especially around sexuality. And I want to say up front that if an aspect of my faith has been used to hurt you or someone you love or unperson you or someone you love or attack you or someone you love in any way, like, I can't emphasize enough that that is wrong and I am sorry. Um, Obviously, that's a different, vulnerable, and pretty vital conversation for a different medium. But because religiousness and faith has so directly impacted the expression of my sexuality and the sexuality of millions, let's be honest, I had to get it on the table and get that off my chest, sort of whip it out, as it were. Anyway, I was made pretty painfully aware at a very young age that how American Christian culture handles sex is like definitively fucked up. And notice that I say Christian culture, not Christian faith. I have a few vague ideas on how Christian culture is expressed in the UK, but in the US, like, Christian religious culture is monolithic. It typifies a lot of the way white kids my age grew up in the US. There are meme pages devoted to it on Instagram. Like, it's a thing with a capital T. And it has actually very little, if anything, to do with the expression of faith itself. Um, so back to sex. Because of Christian culture, oh man, I might get emotional because this is such a thing. Everyone thinks that Christians are kind of like sexually repressed little prudes. They're like virgin unicorns who sort of like wait for marriage and like flop dispassionately around in missionary position for like 20 years, pop out like 2 to 7 kids, stay married, maybe masturbate in the closet secretly, and then they die. And to that point, like, in a cultural Christian context, to somebody who grew up only with cultural Christianity, that's like quote unquote good behavior. Um, but like, the reality is humans are messy. And so that doesn't even scratch the surface of every WASP man who starts their secret hardcore porn addiction in high school while going to church on Sunday, promising horrible, twisted, shame-filled sexual experiences when they finally can get married and try it all out on one poor woman till death do them part. Like, that doesn't even scratch the surface of every woman who spends her whole life scared to wear a tank top or like leggings because she was told her body is meant to stay pure for her husband. Or worse, who was sexually assaulted in a religious environment and told it was because she caused someone to be tempted. Like, this is real shit. You know what I'm talking about. And just another thing, like, in America, and I'm sure in some Christian contexts in the UK, like, every young couple gets married barely out of college because they grew up with the message that heterosexual marriage is the ultimate goal of human existence, and not to mention the only avenue by which to quote unquote correctly explore their sexuality. So, like, just in case you weren't getting it, cultural Christianity's approach to sex I'm gonna get a dry. I'm like running out of saliva. I'm talking so much. Uh, it's fucked up. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So I grew up in this culture. Like, I literally know its language. I know what it looks like. I was the girl that had to measure her tank top straps because if they were like more than if they were less than 2 fingers thick, then I was somehow like immoral. Um, but I literally thank God every day that I had family and friends who could tell me the difference between Christian culture and Christian faith. And let me tell you, there is a difference, thank the Lord, between how my faith informs my sexuality and the horror story of religious culture that I just described. I'm not going to go into like a theological, exegetical, sociological explanation of what I believe or why that culture exists, but I can tell you this. I firmly believe deep down in my soul that like the Christian religious culture, it will answer for its crimes against humanity. I genuinely believe that God hates pain bred in his name, especially around something as deeply human and divine as sexuality. So, all that said, my Christian faith, meaning the internal practices and expression of my literal beliefs in a loving God, that has meant that I have over 25 years worth of experience in abstinence from sex and in the discipline of fasting, which is why your 40-day, 40-night unsatisfied adventure outside of a religious context is like so fascinating. I'm so excited for you. I'm like scared for you because, not scared, that's the wrong word to use, but basically I could not imagine abstaining the way you are without kind of quote a higher power to believe in on the hard days. Real talk. I was abstinent, like I said, for 25 years until literally marriage. I didn't even masturbate until I was like over U.S. legal drinking age, and that wasn't even a religious choice. That was just a personal one. And when I felt ready and I started masturbating, there was no like shame attached to it. I was just curious, and it was a joy really to kind of explore the way I was formed. Um, those choices to abstain and like just wait for that kind of thing, those weren't without their sharp edges. In college, I was a part of a comedy group that twice a year devoted an entire show to sexual humor. I participated once and then literally had to go vomit in the loo because, to my little Christian brain and heart, I just spent 2 hours mocking an act that I genuinely, deeply believe is holy and intimate and an expression of love and promise. And anyway, to make fun of that for 2 hours in front of other people, it felt pretty awful, and I was kind of heartbroken. Um, I once had a guy literally disinvite me to a house party because, quote, your whole purity thing makes us kind of uncomfortable, end quote. I still like pretty regularly misinterpret jokes and come-ons, and I'm pretty good at recognizing that, oh, poor little lamb look I get from more liberated women who know that I spent most of my life as a virgin. But despite all that weirdness, um, I actually really I love this part of myself a lot. I like remaining unsatisfied for the majority of my life has actually kind of, I don't know, it's forced me to figure out who I am without my comforts. Kind of has forced me to like pinpoint what actually validates me, what I think of my body, and what I really want out of my sex life. Um, in a nutshell, my faith asks that I love my creator first and that I love my neighbor as myself. It asks that I see my body as a temple for the holy and that I treat it accordingly. My faith teaches me that wine and food and pleasure are good things. Like we're told they are gifts, implying that there's a giver. So I am meant to enjoy these things, but not to the point where I forget where they came from. Which is why I actually fast. There are regular weeks throughout every season that I choose to go without certain favorite foods because it helps me to kind of reorient my mindset a little bit. Like that food and pleasure and chocolate and whatever, that stuff is a gift, and that my relationship with the giver of those things could potentially be even more satisfying than those things as an end to themselves. Um, and like when it comes to sex, I chose to abstain until I was married basically for the same reason, but with a little more nuance. My faith tells me to see my heart, mind, body, spirit, and soul as one thing while I'm alive. It tells me that my body is a dwelling place for the literal God of the universe. And with that kind of worldview where it's like your holistic self and a home for God, it has always been hard for me to imagine sharing my body in that way with more than one person or in a casual context. Um, does that mean that I reject or like I repress my own fantasies and my kinks, or that I don't get like turned on from, that scene in Fleabag? You know what I'm talking about. Um, hell no. Like, I love thinking about sex and writing about sex and reading about sex and having sex now that I'm married. Like, I love sex. Hell, I'm a producer for a sex therapy podcast. Like, it's what I love it. I think it's awesome. But it does mean, like that faith framework and all the abstinence and everything, it means that I take my sex life really seriously. Um, every time I masturbate or that I have sex with my husband, it's an act of, in some way, I see it as an act of worship or of love and an expression of kind of pretty radical vulnerability with one other person. Um, who, incidentally, has co-promised with me to kind of commit to one another as we are, with all of our comforts and our addictions and our traumas and our kinks and our fantasies. And the commitment is to explore it first and foremost together, no matter what. Because at the end of the day, I mean, for both me and my husband, like, a core narrative of our faith is about how God literally dies, emptying himself in order to become one with humanity. Like, that's intimate language. Our faith is about intimacy, like petit mort. Like, it's there is, in the act of sex, in our heads, a symbol of being one with God. So that's why we don't have so much of it with more than one person, because it's so special. And, like, again, like I said, does that exclude the opportunity to have fun and get kinky and, like, explore acrobatic, wild, ridiculous expressions of how to put a penis in a certain place? Like, no, of course we're going to be creative and have fun with it. But it's in a context that has sort of an agreement about the worth of the act and the worth of the people involved in the act. I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, but like I warned you, there are a lot of thoughts and feelings here, a lot of trauma and worldview stuff to work through. But the point is, I'm so excited for you and your 40-day journey. I know you're, I think, probably 10, 12 days. You're a fourth of the way. You're on your way. I know we likely have radically different worldviews, and you need to know, I celebrate that. Like, that's dope. I also want you to know that, like, on the days where it's really tough and you're wondering kind of why the heck you're doing this, just just please remember how loved you are. Please remember that, like, you're freaking beautiful from the inside all the way through, and that all of life is a gift, and that you, with or without a fuck or a coffee or a wine or whatever, like, no matter how unsatisfied you are feeling, know that you, I mean, and I can only speak from how I see the world, but I really believe you carry the image of God. And for what it's worth, I know that God smiles when God thinks of you. You're enough. Okay, I think I'm quite finished. Edit this however you like. I don't care where it's posted or who. Yeah, anyway, much love. Thanks again for opening this chat. Bye.